Yeah, way back when, David and I were at the same college as each other, although we're a year apart, and he had a band going, and you lost your singer, as I recall,
Yeah.
and we're in the middle of doing some demos, and I used to hang out in the student rooms at the piano and playing and stuff, and they kind of knew that I could sing without really knowing me. We didn't know each other, did we?
Not really, no.
No, just
No, I heard you playing.
yeah, no. And so they needed someone to quickly finish this demo, which I did, and that seemed okay, and we formed a band out of that. It was a band called New Hearts, who got signed and did some stuff, but didn't last a terribly long time. It was during the punk era, and we were a bit musical for punk, probably. And out of that, David and I were retained to put something else together, write new material and all the rest of it, in what I suppose would have been called nowadays a sort of like a band development deal. So there wasn't much money to be had, but we had facilities and instruments and studios. And we created the idea of Secret Affair out of that. So really it was always Dave and I with the music and the concepts and the ideas, bringing people in to make the thing complete. We were influenced by a kind of a 60s turn of music. There were two strands to it. I was quite Motown and sort of 60s soul influenced, and Dave, being a guitarist, had a lot of Small Faces and Townsend stuff, and other people that he'll would have heard of that I won't. But you know, so the idea we kind of tried to play to these two interests of ours, and to kind of wedge together this sort of soul-y thing that had this hard rock feel, you know, because we wanted to try and create our own unique sound. The whole modish thing, if you like, kind of evolved without it being under our control. You know, we had a look and an image and a pose in mind for what we wanted to do, and I don't know what the synchronicity about it was, but at the same time, a lot of young people were getting a bit fed up with the punk thing and were looking for something else, and they were reviving the mod thing. So it was a bit of a marriage made in heaven. For, you know, it just seemed, it sounds a bit pompous, but it seemed a bit ordained that, you know, these people were doing this, and it was very much like the kind of thing that we're doing, and the 60s musical influences and all the rest of it. And that sort of helped identify the band, and we very, very quickly picked up a mod-based following. Which we were happy to embrace because it was a good fit. But our idea, our concept was from the first album called Glory Boys, which was, you know, kind of a bit of mini rock opera about a particular kind of person, a particular kind of place, and a particular look, and it was and it fitted together. Musically, you know, we did try to develop what we were doing. We were quite proud, I think, of the idea. We were not ashamed to be a pop band in the conventional sense of making enjoyable 3.5-minute pieces of music that people would buy from shops. That's when people used to buy records in shops, of course. None of your viewers will know that. It's now occurring to me, but never mind. Hence the death of the music industry. The band evolved and developed really along this pattern of influences drawn from the 60s, and I don't know, what else have I left out there, do you think? Shouldn't we mention something to do with guitars? Just,
Well, I don't know.
I think there are two important strands to the band in that, which should be mentioned given that this is part of a live DVD, which is that we treated the studio as a musical instrument in itself. I like to think that we did some very good and unusual things with the band sound in the studio. The live thing we regard as a completely different thing that we do. I still think possibly we've always been. Do you think we're better live than we are recorded? We probably are.
In some respects, I think
Yeah.
so. Yeah. Where we are, I think now,
Yeah.
with in fact we can augment the sound. We used to be really a three-piece backing, but with Ian playing trumpet and a dedicated sax player, and then they would play a kind of horn section sound together, and that was how we went out for many years originally.
Mm.
But to this 8-piece lineup, it's such a big sound.
Yeah.
And that's effectively what we've developed into now.
These guys that we're working with, Dave and I, as has been mentioned a number of times now, are the founders and the writers. This is an entirely new crop of musicians. A lot of them are people that we've seen or done little bit other scraps of work with in other projects that we've done. And in particular, Russ and Sean, the rhythm section, are guys that I happened to be. I did some work with them in a recording studio on behalf of another artist. I'd never met them before, as a matter of fact, and I just thought they were extraordinary and really not very up themselves about the fact that they were so good. Possibly, my suspicion was they were a lot better than they thought they were, and so we'd been working with some sort of pro session-ish type guys who were great to work with but weren't always able to make themselves available for the project that we were working on. And I immediately thought of Sean and Russ and discussed it with Dave, and we did one rehearsal and we both agreed that it just really worked. That they'd worked with other bands who were similarly influenced, I suppose, so the communication was very easy for us because we had the same points of reference when we were describing the style or how something should be approached. The horn section, Andy Brush the sax player, is a guy that I've worked with on a number of other projects. He's an excellent musician, and he brought on board Martin, our trumpet player. Steve Rinaldi is the trombone player, is someone that I've is a mate of ours, has his own band, and used to be a principal trombone player in another sort of mod influence band many years ago, and I really should know the name of them, but I don't, so sorry Steve if you watch this. There you go. So it was nice to get people that you really like on board as well, so they became the horn section.
And Bryn Barkland,
yeah,
a fantastic Hammond player. It's one of my contacts. I'd done some bits and pieces with him, and it was one of those things where we actually only intended last year to have the horn section at certain gigs, and then we thought, Christ, let's just keep this going because it sounds so good. And then somewhere down the line we decided to put an extra Hammond player in. Obviously it's quite an expensive proposition to run an 8-piece band plus your crew, but we seem to do well with it. It actually works well in terms of presenting something entirely new to what we did, say, 30 years ago. And Bryn, I think we put Bryn in effectively to play some Hammond just for 1 or 2 shows.
That's right. Yeah.
But every time I turn up, he's still here.
Yeah.
I turn up at the airport, I go, Bryn. I go, I'm here. And he's such a nice bloke. You go, you can't, what can you say?
He turns up when we don't play him even now. We can't get rid of him. He was round my house the other night.
But he's here tonight, isn't he?
Yeah, I think I
saw him on stage, yeah.
He's good.
Yeah. Time for action.
I was just thinking of Reddit Point there, you see.
Time for action.
25 years in the business.
Time for action. At the time that song was written, Ian and I already had a history of being in New Hearts, signed to CBS, which when you sign to a label like that, and it's you think we're so young, and Ian was 17, I was 18, turning 19. You have no idea what's going to happen other than you think it's going to be successful. But we were very, very aware of the punk scene from early on, and before it became very much a new wave scene, and we were very much we were out, every night of the week, immersed in it. And I think, it's one of the new wave signings. Well, things didn't work out well for us, and I think Ian would agree. In the end, there's an element out there at the time where there's so many people striving to make a name in punk and new wave, and a lot of snobbishness in a way, a lot of elitism, and a lot of little cliques, and I think in a way that was the antithesis of what punk was supposed to be about.
Absolutely.
And I think that got up my nose, and it got up Ian's nose, and of course when things didn't really go well, because the music press at the time were all powerful, so one bad review, or even if you've got a major label behind you, one bad review, you've got problems. I mean, you think about it today, it's just, you can't even imagine it, right? And so that song, in a way, is a touch, it touches on that. But at the same time, we were also now immersed in the emergence of mod culture, but with a new youth energy behind it, a new generation behind it. And because we were at that same age, And we were watching our audience growing and growing. At the same time, you could see the Jams audience turning from like punk very much into a mod audience. It was a very exciting time. There's no doubt that the film Quadrophenia had a major effect on a certain pocket of people, you know, of young people. And so I guess it was almost a kind of a call to arms of what we were around, although we didn't even really need to do that because it was all happening for us. And the same really, you could say, maybe apply to my world. It's when you're that young and you're kind of around, we'd be fortunate, instead of living in, say, amongst a small group of people in your local area, we were privileged to, at a very young age, to have travelled and played to so many people, young and old, around the UK and wherever. And so there is so much hope about what you may be about to achieve. And when we're around so many people with that, just starting out in life, all the audience out there, they don't know what they're going to do. And I guess it's a celebration of youth and of what's to come.
One of the things that I've always liked about us and would make me want to go and see us is that, as well as some of the earnestness and the defiance and the resentment and the other things that rock songs often try to do, is I like to think that a lot of what we do, particularly live again, is just a straight celebration, and that a lot of what we do is just full of joy, and that, you know, when you come to see us, sometimes it's, you know, apart from all the chest beating, it's also about dancing and having a really good time. So Let Your Heart Dance is really about that, and it's just got some cheeky lyrical references to the things that Letting Your Heart Dance might replace. It might go to you know, Goodbye the Pogo, Tired Old Disco, Time for, you know, it's that kind of stuff. But it's really it's whimsy, really, in a sense. It's just like any kind of Motown song that you can think of that urges people to get out the dance floor and have a good time. Yeah. Lost in the Night. Stealing softly through the night, see the shadow of Mac the Knife. Mac the Knife is not actually a character from a Frank Sinatra song. He's a character from played by Beckett and other people, really. The lyric is the setting of a modern day Mac the Knife stealing the streets of Soho, stealing away the dreams. See, we do get earnest at times on stage. Stealing away the dreams of ambition and optimism and hope, which is pretty much how I was feeling at the time. So he's a symbol of everything that would deny people their aspirations and their hopes. And I still to this day don't think many people realise actually what I'm deliberately drawing the lyric from. But you know now. Go and see the opera or Beggar's Opera. It's really good. Sometimes to my eternal joy and sometimes to my permanent regret, the thing that we did with Glory Boys was a bit bold, which is in terms of the production of the album. I did a lot of things on it that actually made it sound like a 60s record. So now when I play it back, you know, having done different things, and I sometimes think, oh, I wish I'd just done that with the same modern kind of thing that modern records sound like, you know. So I'd kind of deliberately made it a bit toppy, and the mixes didn't have as much bass in it, because in olden days it was very, very hard to get the bass up really loud in a mix. And I did things like that, and sometimes I wish I hadn't, and sometimes I'm really pleased that we did, because it was a really brave thing to do. Because the album, therefore, you know, is not like anybody else's album at the time. It has its own defined sound and identity, and it also has a lot of kitchen sink production about it, in that there's a lot of instruments going. There are harpsichords and timpani and tubular bells and window panes being smashed, and you know, there's just loads and loads of stuff going on. Which, given that he and I were so we were 18 and 19 then, weren't we? I guess, going in to make our first album. a lot of people forget how young we were when we were doing that kind of stuff, and now when I look back at it now, I can't believe how outrageously I'm going to do whatever I do. You know, I've got an entire studio here. I'm going to use it, kind of thing. You know, often a lot of bands' first albums are very true reflections of their stage sound, because that's all they know, and they're a bit timid of. And we weren't timid at all. We were bold as brass and went there and made a really, really big album. And I'm sort of pleased with that. Do you concur with that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so Behind Closed Doors was the second album, which met with a slightly mixed reaction, both from people who didn't like us very much and people who already did like us. Again, I thought it was rather brave, but we were by that time I really kind of identified as the mod band of the leading mod band of the time. Even the Jam were trying to distance themselves from that. I'm sure Paul Weller will disagree now, but I'm telling you, he was. And so we were out there, you know, soaking up all of the negatives that came about this anti-revivalist thing that the music press had in its head. And we came out with an album that didn't sound exactly like the first, and wasn't full of modtastic dance tunes and 60s influenced stuff. You know, a couple of the tracks on it were, you know, almost progressive and experimental and really very, very hard to define. Although it did have My World on it, which is quite possibly, well, it's certainly the best single we ever made. But even My World had a 16-piece orchestra on it, which freaked people out, because there were still people running around wondering if they were credible or not, and what it is that you have to do to be credible. Credible badges running around, you know, NME, that kind of stuff. So the second album was a bold kind of thing to our fans, which I think, you know, tortured and teased them a bit, because they were a bit bemused and puzzled. Nowadays, because of all that experimentation and boldness, without fail, most people that I speak to, as I say, after this show that we're doing tonight, will say that it's their favourite album, and that, you know, in retrospect, they got what we were doing. Probably it was not the best second album to have made. It's a classic in the days when there were albums, of course. There was a classic syndrome in the time life of a band that their second album was always a difficult thing, and we suffered, didn't we, exactly from the problems that come with second albums about songwriting.
Those days have passed now, but really you're either an album band or a singles band in those days, and your success was defined by selling a lot of singles, getting Radio 1 airplay, getting on the A-list, and making Top of the Pops. There was the only route forward. There was nothing else you could do. So either you went down the singles route, and obviously if you faltered slightly, you were in serious trouble, really. Or you were going down the album route. And we had, you know, the old group, Whistle Test would be the equivalent would be Jules Holland, I suppose. And there would be album bands that didn't release singles in those days. We were perceived to be switching, if you like, from doing the strictly singles route to success, to having this kind of grandiose, multi-instrumental, almost conceptual album that a lot of the people that following us would go scratching their heads. And then we went back, and again, you see, it's funny that the follow through 30 years later, funnily enough, it's not only are we now performing an 8-piece band, but we're now playing in countries we never played when we were at our peak, if you like, and we were going to Italy and Spain before the end of the year, and then we're off for the first time, we're off to Japan in January. So it's kind of curious that all these years later, that sound we had, really, here we are, in a way, doing it bigger and better.
Yeah. Okay, business as usual. I suppose in reaction to that confusion that we spread amongst our people who followed us, and the fact that we're doing a lot of gigging as well, we decided for that album, which we were under constraints to bring in with a slightly smaller budget than we'd been allowed for the prior albums. To make it more of an album that was a reflection of a core band. And I quite liked the idea of giving myself the limitation of not being able to throw in a kitchen sink and another piece of timpani and a door shutting in the background, you know, to actually see what you could do with instruments. The production wash for the album, nevertheless, was 3-piece guitar-led band, horn section, and Hammond organ. Funny enough, which is exactly what we're doing tonight. But with not much else, no fancy stuff, no progressive rock going on in there. And we went away to a little residential studio in Cornwall, which is quite a weird experience. A place called Roach Studios, wasn't it? Yeah, near Roach Rock. And ensconced ourselves in that kind of little weird world, which, it being Cornwall as well, I think made it doubly surreal. So I recall it as a very surreal time. I just made this album in a much shorter period of time than we had, and what's interesting about it is that it has none of the grandiose ambitions of other albums, but again, a lot of feedback that I get from people that I talk to after the shows is that in songwriting terms it's probably the best collection of songs that Dave and I ever wrote, which is possibly a reflection of our pre-production prep for that album, was where we hadn't been doing it before, to be honest, is we forced ourselves to sit in a room with each other in exactly the same way as we had when we'd first put the whole thing together, which was literally like, you know, him sitting with an acoustic guitar saying, this is an idea, and me with endless scraps of paper with bits of words written up, you know, putting the whole thing together. And we consciously forced ourselves to work the way we had done before we, you know, had any degree of success. And that kind of comes across quite well, I think, you know, and I think you sense that with the album.